Well, welcome, Dr. R. Michael Fisher. I'm here on a series called Careers of Folly and Wisdom, and this is episode number 3. It also is a special time of year. It is coming down to the end of 2025, and I just want to thank all who have followed this program, my YouTube as well, throughout the year, and this will probably be the last video I do. But last, of course, not least, because we're with a very interesting guest today that I've just met in probably 6, 7 months. Very different than the other two episodes because one was a 45-year relationship. I interviewed someone, and the other one was a 17-year relationship. So, welcome, Quinn Jacobson, and just tell us where you're from, Jacobson, and we'll go from there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And yeah, we're short. We have a short relationship so far, but I think that may change in the future. But yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you asking me to come on and chat with you. I live in Las Cruces, New Mexico. We're a border town. We're just north of the Mexico line, Ciudad Juarez, and El Paso, Texas. I shop in El Paso. We go to Juarez when we want to get out of the country quick. So we're right here in the Chihuahua Desert. That's where we live.
Yeah, very good. Well, you and I think a short period of time we're connecting, but I got a feeling it feels like it's a little bit of a soul type relationship encounter. If you just look at our spaces, sort of volumes of library, art studio, probably not far. Mine is kind of jammed into my other workspace, as you can see behind me, the easel and so on. We connected in a very interesting way, but let me just say before we start there, folly and wisdom is really an idea I had to talk with people who, like myself, getting up there, had a lot of career, a lot of path, a lot of arcs of life. And, I think we've come to at least some kind of philosophical positions about life. And one of them is what is the advantage of folly? Folly being perhaps our fallibility, being perhaps where we make big boo-boos. We are misguided. We are arrogant, young, and so on. And what are some of the wisdoms that we gain from those follies? So we're going to play with that, but we can certainly go into any topic. Again, I really appreciate you being here. I respect you. And why don't you share with the audience how you and I connected your story?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the it was very interesting because my interests have been involved in creativity and mortality, kind of the intersection there. And for years, I was looking for a program to kind of formalize my ideas, to bring things together, to get people sounding boards and people engaged. And I came across here in New Mexico, I came across Southwestern College up in Santa Fe, about 3 hours north of me here. And they have a program called Visionary Practices and Regenerative Leadership, VPRL, a doctoral program. So in 24, I applied and did an interview, and I started this year in August, September. I attended my first residency. But in the interim of that, as they gave me the literature and the information and the faculty, I became concerned that I may not have good fits for faculty in what I was interested in doing, in the sense of specifically what I was doing.
So you're coming in as mature adult student, several careers is my guess. Very accomplished, published author, umpteen books. So we'll get into perhaps that. But I'm really curious, you're coming with a lot of background to a PhD, which, some people do and some don't, right? Some are just on academic stream. They come into a PhD. They don't necessarily have a lot of arc of you do. You have a lot of competency and achievement. And so what kind of happened as you kind of got in there and started meeting people, talking, getting responses to your had a pretty strong idea where you're going to want to go in your PhD.
Yes, I've been circling these ideas for decades, literally decades.
Yep.
And so you're so right, and I think you said it very well there. I came into this program and I always say, don't confuse my clarity with rigidity. I came into this program with ideas that I wanted to formalize. Do I need a PhD? No. Do I want a PhD? I guess maybe if that's the end result, that's what it is. What I want more is connection and people in a program to connect with, share ideas, share resources, kind of get the word out, if you will, and make connections. And so, yeah, I came into the program with a lot of work behind me, with a lot of ideas, with what I felt like was very kind of sound structural scaffolding to build these ideas up. And I wanted to share them with some advanced thinkers. And short story long, as Sheldon Solomon says, when I came across your profile, your faculty profile, and I looked you up, I thought this is in fact, one of the first videos I saw of yours was the review or commentary on the new Becker film, All Illusions Must Be Broken. And I thought, wow, this guy teaches there. This is my guy. We're gonna hook up. We're gonna do this. And so when I got to the residency and started looking around for mentors and faculty, and I was showing them my books and talking about my ideas, it was just, it's a great school, don't get me wrong, but it's so psychotherapy oriented,
Okay.
uh, that and I consider myself an existentialist, a
Great.
philosophical
Good.
existentialist,
Fair
and
enough.
so I was coming up against some barriers, and
Yeah.
and so that's kind of how it evolved, and that's when I reached out to you, and the director said, reach out to him, absolutely, he's your guy, and I said, terrific, I'll do that.
Yeah, because all the students, eventually will require some people to guide, for example, their independent studies, to possibly be mentors. I think you're required to have a mentor.
Yes,
And then, ultimately down the line, there's the possibility of someone to be on your research council, which we call the
yes.
wisdom council, and so on. So there is a trajectory in doctoral work for searching and, connecting with people you connect with. Like that's important. Of course, you also kind of want to maybe connect with some people who maybe are a little more tensional and a little more in disagreement, right? You kind of got to balance that. And I think every doctoral student has to figure out. My wife says, do you want to have a love-in or do you want to have an exciting committee? You can choose either one because they do, literally.
That's a good way to put it. I will say this. This is not my first rodeo in higher ed. Of
Oh,
course,
okay.
I have a graduate degree and I have an
Oh,
undergraduate degree, and so one of the things I find about academia is they generally tend to look at changing people to record progress in their work, right? And so I came in eyes wide open, fully awake, knowing that this could be a
yeah.
potential barrier for me. And I'm working through that. I've gone through one quarter now. I've done a couple of classes. I've had a residency up there for a week or so.
Okay,
And
I got to go get the gold star. I got to. You
the participation
you've
award.
submitted yourself. Enough.
Yeah. But I'm coming to the realization of how to deal with where I'm at, and I think you laid it out very well, and it's all true that I'm coming in with life experience and education and art, and I've been a creative for my entire life. All my degrees are in that. So I'm trying to work out how to fold that in to the program and get in every single course I do, find those threads and pull them down and connect to what I'm doing. And that's what I'm attempting to do.
Yeah, and so far your first semester been going okay.
Yes, very well, very well. Yeah,
Haven't booted you out.
haven't failed me or booted me out. No, I think
I think you
some
need to go see one of the counselors.
yes, so some puzzling looks sometimes, and some very interesting feedback at times when
What would
I
be an example? Couple examples. You don't
yeah,
have to name
I'd love
names.
to. I think it's fascinating when I think about this. So to give a little bit of context, my
Yeah.
interest, like I said earlier, is in kind of the intersection of creativity and mortality. What does that mean? For me, it means where the problem. We know we're going to die, and most of the culture's organized around us to not feel that too directly, that mortality, that knowledge of our death. The question is what do artists do with that awareness that's different? That's my main thesis. That's kind of my main interest. So
And
the
what they
first
do consciously and or unconsciously.
exactly, and then making possibly, and I haven't gotten this far, but making some of that more aware for people. But so so the first thing is we know we're going to die. And so when I put that out there, all of a sudden that just occupies people's minds as well as it should, because that's how we're designed psychologically and from an evolutionary standpoint to tamper that down, to get that out of our, put that out of our consciousness. So to give you an example of
And
some of
that
the
comes from
things,
a lot of research and that comes from theory, just to say that's not just
yeah,
your view.
very, very good. Yes, that's absolutely correct. And to give you a couple examples, I became known as the death guy in the
Okay.
residency, right? So
Okay.
that, and here's the problem. Here's the problem. I'm not the death guy.
Okay.
I'm the guy that's curious about what happens when you're alive. That dash between your birth year and your death year, that line is what I'm interested in. How does that knowledge of the death date affect what you're doing when you're alive? So there was some misinterpretation about what I was doing and the reasons I was, and it's my fault. I didn't know how to communicate very well. I
Okay, well,
did.
we're talking about folly.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. 100%. That's absolutely correct. So I worked through that the best. I learned a lot. So going out in public, and I've been noodling this stuff for decades, going out in public in a large group of basically strangers and trying to share this, I fell on my face, completely fell on my face. Now, I will say this. I did expect a little more connection and reciprocity and some understanding, which really taught me how well this psychological, this evolutionary, what I call a dimmer switch, we turn down that knowledge of death, how well that works in people, right? It's fascinating. Or they switch it over to, oh, you're just talking about death. We had another example. I'll give you a couple of examples here. One example is we had this project to do at the residency where we made these collages. And I started out making this collage, and people would literally bring over, you know, skulls and death and cemeteries and, all that
I
stuff,
saw
right?
this. You
And
must be able to use this.
that's okay, exactly. And that's okay. That's okay. That's
Yeah.
that's a beginning, right? Because there is an element to that. I can't throw the baby out with
Yeah,
the
no, you can't.
proverbial
Yeah.
bathwater. So that was one example. Another example, I literally had people, we did this presentation. It's called a pechakucha. It's a Japanese form of presenting your information, 6 minutes and 40 seconds kind of thing. And I gave my pechakucha, and I had people come up after, faculty included, as well as peers, other students, and start talking to me about grief, how you should write papers and present papers about grief at these conferences and at this and that. And it was like, wow, I am so missing the mark here. I have just like, I don't, and it was confusing to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was folly. It was folly.
But you're also alone. I mean, that's tough.
Yes,
That's
I
a tough
am.
road, right? Like to have a partner, even one person who's, two heads
That's
thinking
so right.
under the pressure.
So right. So that's so absolutely correct. Yes. And so what I did, I had to take a deep breath, calm down, and then say, look, I need to approach this. I need to think about how I'm approaching this. In fact,
Yeah.
before that 7 day or 8 day, I don't know how long the residency, a week residency was over, I had already formulated in my head this public facing book that one of the very first things I was going to do, because I need, first things first in that order. And so that was kind of the birth of saying, wow, I really need to make this happen. Now, having said that, I had already been working on another, in fact,
Yeah.
did proofs, published a great big book on my work in the mountains, which talk about these theories and the basis
Okay.
of what I'm doing and all that, but not in the way I'm going to do it here. So
Yeah.
that's kind of
Well,
the long way around.
so I'm a professional educator. I can't claim to be a psychologist. I can't claim to be a philosopher, although I'm an amateur in all of these things, right? Like that's my passions. But Okay, so I'm a PhD in curriculum and pedagogy, and I'm listening. I'm going, okay, well, this guy is struggling with having tremendous content and experience, wants to put that out and share it with passion. It probably impacted your life positively. You're like going to be like almost born again here. And I got to pass this out to the world. This made such a difference for me. So we know that shtick, right? We know
Yep.
the health self-help guru, teacher, or whatever. You may not like those terms, but eventually you still got to teach. You got to teach what you know, even to sharing calmly and humbly as I see you do on your broadcasts, your
Mm,
podcast.
mm.
But I just keep looking at him. He's got to really admit he's a freaking educator, whether he likes it or not. So do you not like that term, or are you trying to find another term?
Full disclosure here.
Okay, go for it.
I taught higher ed. I mean, yeah, I mean, full disclosure. I taught, not only did I teach higher ed, I taught uh, computers for artists. I taught photography. I taught all in the arts, and then some technology that was coming in at the time.
Okay.
And and again here, I'm kind of this art and alchemy guy. I work in this very old photographic
Right.
process from the 1850s, and I've taught 1,000 workshops all over the world in this process. So I'm kind of a chemist. I'm kind of like you. I'm kind of
Yeah.
this guy that loves life and
Yep.
biophilia, the E.O. Wilson guy. I kind of dab, and it makes your life rich.
Yep.
And one of the most richest experiences when I read Becker and how I got involved in this, because my entire life just folded over, perfectly fit into those ideas. And so yes, I am an educator. You ask my wife or my daughter, they'll tell you
Yep.
I do have a passion for education. I may not frame myself that way, but I
Yeah.
am.
Good. Good. Thank you. So yeah, this book that you have for the first one anyway that you're envisioning would be basically putting this. It's almost what I call the psychology of creativity and mortality. Um, and really, it's the psychology of creativity, art, mortality, and morality. I don't think
Sure.
you're that far off any of those. Do you think?
And throw ethics in there. No,
Yeah,
absolutely not. Yes.
morality, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In the ethical domain. So, okay, well,
Yes.
thanks. I want to get your quotes. I asked you to bring a couple quotes.
Yeah.
These are like your favorite passion, more or less. Give us an intro to the quote, and then that'll help us
Sure.
go deeper.
Sure. Yeah. So mentioned just a little bit about Becker. He was a cultural anthropologist. He died in 1973. He wrote this Pulitzer Prize winning book called The Denial of Death that I read about 10 years ago that just really flipped me around like we're talking about here. And the first one, and I want to read these because I don't want to screw them up, but the first one is from The Denial of Death. Actually, they're both from The Denial of Death, but I'll put the second one in context. So the first one is the idea of death, the fear of it, haunts the human animal like nothing else. It is a mainspring of human activity. That's my first one. Now, this one dovetails into that one because now we drill down in and get specifically on what I'm interested in. And this is from The Denial of Death, but he's quoting Otto Rank, one of Freud's disciples that wrote the book Art and Artists. And Becker quotes him in The Denial of Death. He says, Rank's quote, the artist takes in the world, but instead of being oppressed by it, he reworks it in his own personality and recreates it in the work of art. In those two sentences are basically sums up what I'm interested in. Okay, we know we fear death. What does that do to us in our day-to-day lives? And as creative people, how do we metabolize that? Not deny it, but metabolize that. And what does that look like? That's what I'm really interested in. So that's why those are probably my two favorite. I have a lot of favorite quotes though,
Oh
but
yeah,
those
it's
two.
pretty hard. Uh, Another piece I remember from Ronk, and I can't pull it out, but I'm not sure exactly where but it's Ronk or somebody interpreting Ronk that I really respect. Matthew Fox, for example, uses Otto Ronk a lot for this notion of compassion and his work on a creation-centered spirituality that's not religious. And but anyway, it was the idea that Ronk also took that step of putting it into creativity or art, as you said, the artist, and moving to and along a trajectory like a spectrum, Ronk said, where the artist is the art. Are you at that? Do you relate to that spectrum? And where are you at with that spectrum? And when where have been some follies maybe in trying to get there?
Yeah, very much so, and that's very good. I am, and one of and you know this very well, but one of the arts-based research methodology that I'm using, and I've been studying for a while now, I really connect with that, and I really see it's like I'm reading a book backwards, or I'm reading something. I've lived all of this and I've experienced all of this. Now I have names and ideas and theories and everything for these things that oh, there I am. And like you said, this kind of Rosetta Stone moment of reading this, oh, there I am. So when it comes to mortality and creativity, I see myself through those ideas. I mean, I see myself living. I see myself seeing my observing myself, so to speak, watching myself, observe myself, like outside of myself, making work. Right? I make these little sculptures, or I do a painting, or I make a photograph, or whatever I'm doing. I'm kind of like a phenomenological experience, right? A lived experience of that. So it's not just making art. I am what it is, kind of thing. It's very, as you know, it's very difficult to put words to this. That's why creative people make things about this, you know. But I'm trying to formulate some of these ideas and put them down so that even the layperson can understand them. I think my biggest concern is how to get over this barrier, this
Yeah.
evolutionary barrier that prevents us from thinking about these things.
So it's a psychological barrier within that connection, certainly to the denial of death. And
Yes.
and as Varkey and Brower say, that is self-deception and that is false beliefs.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
For
okay. We're
our
not
own
just
good.
talking about denial.
Yeah, but for our own good, right? So we can get up in the morning, so we can go to our jobs. Like Becker said, you know, if you didn't have these mechanisms in place, if you didn't have something to lean on to buffer your anxiety, your existential anxiety, you wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. And if you did, you'd have to roll over. And I think it was Solomon or somebody said you'd be reaching for a sedative the size of a
Yeah.
Buick, right? Really interesting stuff. So these things work for us, but how do you have people understand that and then be conscious and aware of, oh, I do think about, oh yeah, you know, I made a video the other day where I wrote some questions out like, you know, that one of the first things that I hear from people when I start talking about this, I don't think about death. I don't have death anxiety. And I say, exactly. That's exactly the answer you should give because those mechanisms are in place. They're working well for you. You get out of bed, you go to your job, you have a family, you have some career or something. Those are all cultural buffers to keep us, to shield us from thinking about this stuff all the time.
Yeah. So, we've got a pretty big network casting here for our audience today. Some that may be brand new. I'm going to put links down to certainly your work and to Ernest Becker and some of the others we've talked about today. So people hang on. There are resources you can go. There's lots of good videos on something called terror management theory, etc. So we're not going to focus so much on that. Is my direction. If I can just pull you a bit, Mr. Quinn, I know you're so passionate about that. But you know some stuff, and when have you thought you knew some stuff and you really didn't know what you thought, and it led to some lessons, hard lessons?
Yeah,
Anywhere you want to start.
that's a very great question. Um, uh, well, for one thing, I've always thought that everyone understood art. I thought it was kind of I didn't know. I'll give you an example here. I grew up in a family. My mother and my father both were photographers. They wouldn't call themselves that, but
Right.
that's what they were. I would go over to a friend's house My family photographed everything. 8 millimeter film, 35 millimeter still cameras, medium format cameras. My family photographed everything. I'd go to a friend's house. And I'd say, "Where are your family films? Where are your photo out?" What? We
Yeah,
don't we
what?
don't do that. Like I,
That'd
I
be
I
yeah,
didn't. Yeah, exactly. I didn't know that people didn't do that. I thought this was so part and embodied part of my life that I didn't understand. That was the beginning. I didn't understand people didn't visually document things and then go back and reflect and examine and talk, and then down the road when grandma died and go back and I photographed my mother and my grandmother in their caskets. I mean, this was the whole thing. So I didn't know people didn't understand art. And that was the beginning of me understanding the power of photography, the importance of photography. And I didn't know people didn't understand that. So by the time I did military time, I joined the the United States Army when I was 17. I went in when I was 18. I joined as an infantryman. So I served 3 years as a combat infantryman, as a mortarman, on a mechanized crew, a rapid deployment force. And then I served 3 years as a combat photographer. So I got to lay over some of my ideas in a different arena in that combat photography role. And there again, I didn't realize that people didn't understand photography and how it worked and the importance of it, even in that situation. And then fast forward a little bit after the military, I got out and I entered undergraduate school. So I went into undergraduate school with this idea that,
what faculty, what department?
a Department of Visual Arts in Weber State University in Ogden, Utah is where I attended. I did a 4-year degree. My degree was a Bachelor of Integrated Studies degree. It was a three major degree with a minor in Spanish. So I was able to become fluent in Spanish, but I did photography, communication, and visual art. So I got all the art history. I did all the photography programs. I got to work with a man named Drex Brooks. He wrote a book called Sweet Medicine. The director at the Southwestern knows this book very well. He photographed massacre sites, Native American massacre sites from Maine to Southern California. I got to work with him in the darkroom on that while he was producing that. And he was one of my professors there. So he influenced me greatly. He was the guy you were talking about, the support. He was that guy for me that I could have those conversations with. And in fact, between 2014 and 2019, I did my own work in honor of Drex. And I tell him in the book, I photographed, I did a project called Ghost Dance, and I photographed Colorado Native American massacre sites, the Sand Creek Massacre and the Beecher Island massacres. And I photographed that in this 19th century process. But undergraduate school really showed me how much I didn't know about what this was all about and how you needed to educate people about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And so, yeah, I went in with, I'm the, at 20, 21 years old, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. I know everything. And I'm going to teach you guys some things here. And I was humbled really quick, especially by people like Drex. He just died in 2023. But Drex wasn't the easiest guy to get along with. He was that type of personality. But man, he was just so he was just so full of creativity and ideas and deep thinking, and I just loved to be around him. I loved to listen to him. I loved to work with him in the dark room. And that opened my eyes to these ideas even before I knew, right? Massacre sites, standing on this ground.
Right,
If
right,
you
right.
if you read Sweet Medicine and you read, I think she's an anthropologist or a sociologist at UC Boulder in Colorado. She wrote the acknowledgement or intro for his book. She talks about Americans ought to know the ground they're standing on, right? I mean, these are deep, deep, deep ideas. So yeah, I didn't know about all that.
So I'm really picking up this theme of you picking up from the ambience of the society, the culture. dominant Western culture, whatever we want to call it, European culture for primarily, and all you're picking up now, there's the denial of the elimination of and the racism and the taking and stealing of land. And were you political? Were you a political guy early on? Were your parents political? Because it's you can't almost not hook denial with some kind of politicality, right? Like it's not just psychological.
Look,
I'm trying to get that connection in here.
you are bringing up some excellent points that just flood my memory. Yes, I without having a name for it. Yes, I was obviously especially when I was younger, not having a name for it. So my parents were blue collar, hardworking people, right? Uh, Democrats, very liberal Democratic here in the United States. They were very liberal people. They were always, my father always told me to, go with the underdog, always have that
Okay.
kind of influence, right? And let
Okay.
me give you an example of what my mother was like. And these are the things you only get with age and time and looking back and remembering. And this book that I've been writing on for years, I've documented all this. But one of the stories in there I tell about my mother is on Thanksgiving, and I know the irony's lost, but this is 50 years ago. But on Thanksgiving here in America is in November, and we celebrate, quote unquote, the founding of America, Plymouth Rock, and all this stuff. But that's beside the point. My mother, we lived in a very white little town, very white, very, in fact, it was quite conservative. My parents kind of stood out for their liberalism in that little place. But every Thanksgiving, she would drive to the local Job Corps. A Job Corps is where they have teenagers that have problems and don't have homes and need to be trained up in, jobs, plumbers, electricians, whatever they want to do. And she would go out there and she would bring 3 or 4 young men home for Thanksgiving. Mexican American, indigenous, African American, in this little white town, and have them sit at our table. And I've got photographs to prove it.
Okay.
And we'd have these people come into our home, complete strangers, not white, not of the same ethnicity, religiosity, or anything like that. And I didn't understand what was going on. I thought it was normal. I
Okay.
thought it was
Okay.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
normal, right?
Yeah.
But looking back on that, that was so progressive to do that. That was 1972, the Vietnam War was raging here and or in Vietnam, and Americans were, upset about that. And a lot of these guys, some of these guys were, political that way. And so it was very controversial to do something like that. But that's how my mother was. My grandmother, anytime she heard a racial slur, this is even in the 1960s, she would go off on people. She would just obliterate them. So I write in my book, there's no doubt you bring up a very good point. I've been heavily influenced. My worldview, my understanding of humanity is definitely political that way. Yes.
One of my colleagues is on the other one of the Folly career and Folly and Wisdom's 4 arrows. He was a Marine and back in his day in the 70s, and he was a captain, ready to lead troops, and only he found out some things about what was going on in Vietnam, and he didn't want to believe it, and then he had to believe it, and then he jumped out. Um, what is your military folly, learning, wisdom that you might pass on? He certainly shares a lot of what he learned, and
Yeah.
I'd be
Um,
glad if you would share some of that.
yeah, absolutely. My my older brother, in 1971, my mother asked if I wanted to go to the airport and pick up my brother from the airport. He was coming back from Vietnam. He'd served 2 tours in Vietnam as a tail gunner. Silver Star, Purple Heart, all the awards you can think of, right? And I said, absolutely. I was, what was I, 8, 9, 10?
Okay.
I don't know. I was a young boy. I said, absolutely. And I'll never forget, my mother drove this 1969 big Mercury Marquis, a bronze one. And back in the day, they didn't have seat belts and all that. Nobody used seat belts and stuff, and they had the bench seat. And I was perched up on the in the back seat, and the passenger, my mother was driving. Went to the airport. We picked up my brother. His name was Brent. And the very first thing I saw, and I didn't understand what was happening, was people were shouting baby killers when this plane pulled
Oh,
up
I
and they
know.
started getting up. You know, back in the day, there wasn't any Homeland Security and all this stuff, right?
I
It was
hear
just
you.
open gates and all that. And they were yelling baby killers. And I even saw a couple of people throwing eggs. And I asked my mother, I said, what's going on? She said, oh, let's get Brent, let's go. And she ran up and she hugged Brent and she scurried out of there. And so Brent was in his greens. He had all of his medals. And oh man, as a kid, I was just looking at that, right? And I was fascinated. And he wasn't saying much. He got in the passenger's front seat. My mom got in the driver's, and I was on the bench seat like this, leaning over, listening. My mother was talking. My brother would say, "Yeah, no," not saying much at all.
Yeah.
And we got on the freeway, and we rolled up the windows in the car, and all of a sudden I smelt something sweet and pungent and just something I'd never smelt before. And I was leaning over like this, looking down at all of his medals shining and all of his, his rank and all this stuff on his uniform. And I was just amazed at it. And, in elementary school, we'd been singing that song about Green Berets, a silver star up on my chest, and all this jingo kind of patriotic stuff. So I was just primed up for all of this and all the propaganda. And I never forgot that smell. But we got home and things went on. And it turns out he was a heroin addict and he'd suffered there. And he, blah, 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 on and on, kind of the same story. But he got cleaned up. He got his education. He ended up being a parole officer, believe it or not, for 30 years. But fast forward to my military time. Um, I had my first experience of smelling a decomposing human body was the same odor that I smelt from his uniform hanging in Vietnam for those 2 years. So all of a sudden, my mind went back to me hunched over on that bench seat, looking at his medals and smelling that, and then experiencing what I was experiencing. So, the biggest thing that the most profound things that I experienced weren't necessarily with enemy combatants, if you will, but with our own soldiers and our own airmen and the dying by suicide and photographing their bodies, gunshot wounds to the heads, strangulation, hangings, all different kinds of just horrible things that just stay with you forever. So I write in my book, this book I've been writing for years, like I said, about all these experiences. When I combine all these up, it's no wonder as a creative person I am where I am sitting right now. And and it changed my view. Am I proud of my military service? Yeah, I guess so. I served my country for a long time. I was a combat. I was in the infantry, and as a photographer, I did 6 years there, and then I served my country. I was a civil servant as a photographer for another 21 years.
Yeah.
So I have 27 years serving this country, and so yeah, I'm glad I did that. But
Oh, can
they're
you
big
coin the folly? Can you coin what the folly would be in the wisdom if you
yeah,
could
yeah.
put it up together?
The folly is thinking that we're the greatest thing since sliced bread and nobody can tell us any differently. And the reality of that is that we're not. And we've hurt a lot of people, including our own people. And
Right.
so the folly was going in with this kind of jingoism rolling around in my head, this kind of exceptionalism rolling around in my head, and coming out with saying, "Whoa, we've got some real big problems." So that's kind of the folly and the wisdom, and that's a good way to put it for sure.
What's the wisdom that you're carrying that you think is one of your gifts right now in being an educator and going into your PhD? Like, do you think
Yeah.
you're carrying a wisdom around education that might be useful to just reflect on?
Wow, that's a really, really good question. Um, I don't know if this is, an answer, but I think my core values are truth, authenticity, and personal responsibility. And one of the things that I will carry and always kind of be known for is my passion.
Yeah.
My passion, what I'm passionate about is real. I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm not trying to get anybody on over on anybody. What I what I talk about, what I speak about, what I believe in is real. And I'm the passion that I show is authentic. And I will take personal responsibility for anything that I'm wrong about or anything that I need to change. I want to do that. I want the truth. I want all that. But I think the answer would be what I would be carrying around in education would be pursue your passion and maybe not your pension.
Mhm. What about learners? What is the toughest thing when you encounter learners? I mean, we've talked a little bit about, just your experience at SWC. You've been around people who, yourself included, who propaganda was effective. So,
Absolutely.
so you're a learner getting sucked in. So, uh,
Yeah.
what is it that you think you want to learn, or what's really important about learners that really intrigues you?
Yeah,
Obviously, the denial of death and the effect it has on learning,
absolutely.
just
That
learning
would
new stuff.
I would put that right at the top of the list. But adjacent or stepping aside from that, I I've written down some of these ideas that I want to do in this public facing book. And I think about learners. That's what I think about
Audience,
is
right? Audience.
audience, right? And so one of the ideas that I had for a chapter in one of the in this book was it's called The Next Great Rupture, The Coming of AGI. And one of the things that I've seen in artificial intelligence and what even algorithms and artificial intelligence and social media have done to young and old people both is it's produced a lot of barriers about learning and accommodating and assimilating and taking in new information, deeply thinking about things, spending even reading.
Yeah,
I've had many requests for people saying, "Would you read your blogs
I know.
on your YouTube?" You know, I mean, yeah, I bet. I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah. So my concerns with learners and especially coming into this book that I want to do is how is that community? What is that audience? How will that audience consume this, or how can I write it or present it so they can consume it? And I even thought, is this even a book? I mean, it's going to be a book. I'm just old school that way. It's going to be a book. But is there adjacent? Is there supplementaries to this? Is there
Sure,
video
sure,
or
sure. Yeah.
audio? And there's going to be audio books with it too, as well too. I'm going to definitely do audio books on it.
Yeah.
But those are
Yeah.
probably my biggest concern is what is AGI going to do with this? What is a singularity or super artificial intelligence? What are we looking at in the next 3 to 5 years? What is that going to do to education and learning? You know?
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Oh boy, huge questions there, aren't we? We're on one really big ones. Just coming down to the last maybe 10 minutes here.
Sure.
Is there anything you want to talk about? Anything you want to ask me about?
Well,
Let's open it up.
yeah, that's great. I'm curious. How and I have to go here because this is kind of my thing, but I'm curious about how I've looked at a lot of your work on fearology and fear, basically, and I'm interested, and I've never asked you this, and I've always wanted to ask you this.
Good.
How do you in light, because you're probably one of the handfuls of people that I actually know that understand the denial of death, Ernest Becker, terror management theory, and those kind of clinical studies and what that data says and all that.
Yep.
You're probably one of the few people that I know that understand that. So my question is how do you fit in this idea of fearology with Becker and TMT and even the creative side aside, just those
Sure.
basic theories? How does that fit in for you?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, okay, we're going to do a four-part series now because I'm like you. I appreciate you, and sometimes I go, oh, I remember I was like that too, and sometimes I go, the lessons I've had to learn, And it's really an interesting journey with you. We're such at the early stages, but I'm going to watch you probably, and you're going to watch me for probably several years. That's it. We're too similar to not. The Renaissance kind of mentality and attitude, life that we have, even though our backgrounds are somewhat different. Although I also come out of kind of the lower side on the east side of the tracks, growing up. So I'm not a sweet given, privileged person that way. And I've always struggled with that. But we have a lot. So, terror management theory, I mean, just off the top, I call it fear management theory. So, I didn't call it fear management theory per se, but before I ever discovered Ernest Becker, terror management theory, which started coming out, terror management theory researchers in social psychology in the early 80s, and publishing, right? 83, somewhere in there. And I, wasn't up on that. And I got onto the fear thing. And there's a whole story of origin, but I don't need to go into why did I jump on that wagon. But there's where I find the connection. And I'll try to hook it to education for you. And I think, and for the audience, it's probably the most easy way to understand how I'm going to conceptualize things here. So I'm not coming in as a psychologist. I love psychology. I also hate psychology. You love a lot of the new thinking in psychology, is my guess, and the new age and human potential. And there's an existentialist that says, I hate that stuff. I'm exaggerating for dramatic purposes.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
We're kind of on the same line. I also love existentialism, and it's not my end all be all either. So terror management theory is a good term as far as I'm concerned. I'm really glad they picked it because I did eventually, nail down fear management theory. And we're doing the same work. They are doing it down a little different lens. Obviously, very heavy Beckerian autorank driven. That's the reality. That's what their theory was. That was their foundation. So I didn't come to fear management theory through that lens. See, I saw that later, and then I was fitting it into my lens.
Mm,
My lens is very, very broad,
mm.
really broad. And I mean, Becker is broad. Thank goodness. No wonder he appeals to transdisciplinary type thinkers like you and I in your PhD program and me teaching there. So then there's the key piece that I brought in because I'm an educator, and that's where I really want to answer your question directly is I'm interested in fear management slash education.
Mm, mm,
Like if you read any of my work with depth, it's FME,
mm,
fear management education. You can't
mm,
do management without education. And you really can't do education without managing something
mm,
relative to the problems of learning. So, fear management education is let's learn more about how we manage fear. This is the 101. Terror management, let's learn more about how we manage terror. And then they direct it to terror of death, mortality, right? So they're directing in that direction, but they're doing the same education management work that has to do with fear.
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're cousins. There
I,
is a spectrum.
I see that cross pollination easily, and that's why I was wondering
Yeah.
how the two see in my mind as I think, and I will say terror management, and I know Sheldon and I know Jeff both. I don't know Tom, but I know two of the authors of the Worm at the Core, and I've talked to both of them, and they both openly acknowledge that they don't address any creativity in that, right? They don't address what we're really specifically what I'm talking about here. But I've always wondered, how is fear different than terror? I mean, the fear of death. I love Yalom's book, Staring at the Sun, Overcoming Death Anxiety, and he focuses, and I'm not a psychologist or a psychotherapist either. I
No,
really don't even have any interest in that, really, to be honest with you. But I love the thinkers in that. But I was just wondering, what's the difference between fear and terror in your mind, or how do you differentiate those two
fear and
things?
terror. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I mean, one of the places I start with that is quite a bit different than the terror people. I'll just call them the terror people.
Yeah.
And that's existentialists,
Yeah,
more
yeah,
or
yeah,
less for
yeah.
a long time.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I think that's really important. So
Yeah.
I'm with you. Um, my directive is as an integral thinker is don't reject anything and listen to everything. Learn what you can, old idea, throw out what you don't want to take with you in building whatever you're building. And that's my modus operandi. So you can be a neuroscientist, you can be this or that. I'll listen. I'm curious and I'm critical. and but I'm going to be curious. So ultimately why terror management theory is less problematic than what I'm trying to do. This is an argument. You can see what you think. Terror is not that hard to work with. It's not hard because it's pinned. It's like there's not too many that don't. Oh, terror. Oh, boom. It's kind of like the extreme. But when you use fear, and then a lot of people say, well, aren't you talking about anxiety? So, the thing that really bugs me, you've got things that bug you, how people respond to you when you bring up death. When I start talking about fear, the academics, and I've tried this in many different departments, and they said, well, why are you studying fear? You should be studying anxiety. That's the real concept. That's where the real scholars.
Mm,
Fear is like serpents. That's like anxiety.
yeah.
I don't want to study anxiety. I'm onto fear, and I could give you that's a whole larger conversation. It's like there's something that in the word fear I think is just really fascinating. And then when I started researching, I started seeing the term fearlessness.
Mm,
And I started finding that all across a very wide spectrum of traditions, etc.
yeah,
Then I
yeah, yeah.
started looking at definitions of fearlessness and I went, oh my God, people have such different views. They're literally, in some cases, opposite. And so I'm going, what's happening to the population when they're trying to understand fearlessness?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You see how fear hooks
Mm-hmm.
and it shows itself. Terror doesn't even show fear. It's like, see, it's not in the language, it's not in the actual linguistic structure of
It's
terror.
it's kind of acute and chronic kind of thing, right? I mean,
You could say that, or emergency based, or
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So
immediate, yeah.
so that was one of the first problems. So that's why
Yeah,
I'm just comparing the
yeah,
strategies of studying fear compared to studying terror. They
yeah.
actually took it's easier to work with. I took this damn thing that is so like this, and then people want to mix it with anxiety. And then here's the most thing that is my pet peeve over 35 years of doing this is I'll talk about, oh yeah, you study fear. And immediately people will say, oh yeah, well, I have the fear of this and fear of that and fear of this. And I go, no, I actually am interested in the study of fear. Now I'm going to have to say it because you're not getting it. I'm interested in fear itself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And they want to go off on
Not
X,
your
Y, Z.
arachnophobia and not
And
your
then they'll pull out the book.
agoraphobia.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
600
no, I
different
see that.
phobias.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I go,
I see
that's
that.
not what I'm not interested in. People can study that if they want. And it's kind of like you. I'm not that interested in psychology per se, you see. So
I
if
get it.
in a way, we're both, you and I can just hear in this conversation, it's been good to clarify, we're struggling with this conceptual framing of and trigger in the way these words have been
For
constructed.
sure. Well
And
said.
so
100%.
we have a lot of that reconstructing, constructing. So just quickly, I basically said I can't really answer the difference between fear and terror straight up. That's the thing, because it's too complex. So I
Right.
actually can't answer that. But what I've done structurally in my writing is I marked fear with two scare marks.
Mm,
And I said, that's the fear, click, that we
yeah.
don't know so well.
Yeah.
The
I
other
get it.
one, when I don't use those, it's the one that's in the dictionary. It's what we define. It's in public discourse. It's the one habitually we sort of know. So you can see what I was doing strategically is trying to create, well, maybe we don't quite know as much as we think we know about fear.
Yeah.
What you're saying is maybe we don't know so much about how the terror of mortality is influencing our life.
Yeah, I would agree.
I don't know how you're going to eventually, as you do your research, how you will come to that maybe in a different, expanded way that the social psychologists didn't do and haven't done.
Right.
You're
Well,
coming more
I'm
for a
hoping
creative lens.
I'm hoping art will give me a way in.
That's what I think.
That's what I'm hoping.
That's what I think.
That's my whole premise. But thank you for that. That's and I will admit I came into that question using that
Yeah,
OED definition of fear.
that's
Right.
right.
I mean, that's what I did. So I thank you for clarifying that. I understand conceptually now what you're doing with that,
Yeah.
even without all the deep dive explanation of it. So thank you. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good.
And in common methodological, it's I'm doing deconstruction and reconstruction.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not taking fear straight up. And
Yeah.
come on, I mean, don't you think, Quinn, that's the artistic way?
It is.
With
It is.
materials, with processes, you don't
Exactly.
take everything
Exactly.
straight up. You've got to work with it in your environment, with your experience and your situation. You can't just say that's that, even if it chemically it's the same chemical.
Right. I totally agree.
So that's what I think we're working in that field of transdisciplinarity sort of covers that, but the artistic lens and the artistic art space approaches, they really leave a lot of unknown. And that's good existentialism.
It is.
Don't
It's
be
yeah.
searching for the static, predictable all the time. You really have to be able to go like this.
Yes.
No.
And to your point, and people often ask me that, well, not often, sometimes they'll ask me this, I don't want to overstay it. But what is existentialism? And to me, the point that you just made, existentialism to me is like if you're going to make this pair of scissors, you're going to design it, you're going to have the size, you're going to have the functionality, you're going to have all that stuff, and then you're going to make it. So the essence is there before it exists.
Okay.
Human beings exist before they have an essence or their function. Where do they get their function? They get it from the culture, their culture. They get it from what's around them and how they're brought up, what they read, what they're exposed to, their parents, their family, their friends. Their culture is where they get their essence. So existentialism to me, just like Sartre said, existence before essence, pre existence and then essence, not like a pair of scissors or a car or this microphone or this computer. That was all conceptual. The essence was there before it was made. So to your point, can I just share with you because you just hit on something that I really want to share
Read it.
here. Yeah, it's just three things or one or four or five things. Problem, we know we're going to die, and most of the culture is organized to help us not feel that too directly, like we just said. Question, my question, what do artists do with that awareness that's different? Like I mentioned that earlier. Claim, artists tend to give anxiety form rather than discharge it through denial. Method, material practice slows experience enough for anxiety to move into objects. Concept, rupture is where meaning fails. Art happens there. Ethic, I'm not fixing the break, I'm staying present with it.
Those are fun.
That's
Fun.
what I do. That's
That's like a poem, man. That's poetic.
oh, thank you. I wrote it just for you here today
Yeah, that's so poetic.
because
So,
I thought you were really going to ask me about well, and you have. I mean, I've loved the conversation. It's really I really enjoyed this. I really have enjoyed this. Thank
okay,
you
well
for
let's
this.
let's let's put a little candy on the top here
Okay.
and throw us off a little bit. I've had this intuition all the time when I'm listening to him. Said, okay, how old is your daughter?
33 and she's a psychotherapist.
Okay, and my daughter's 42 and 44.
Great, great.
Okay, here's the question. Let's both answer it. I'll go
Okay.
first. What would my daughter, and I'll just pick one of them. Uh, what would my daughter say to me after all these years about my weaker side of folly? Okay, so I'll start.
Wow, yeah.
And the feedback, I think I've heard enough, but it would basically be something very simple, of course, but it's like, you have great skills and da da da, dad, but It's the but what do we want to get to here? And she would say, your kind of single-minded devotion kind of left some of the parenting out, and we were insecure at certain points of our life, and you weren't recognizing
Mm,
that.
mm.
And we had a, you know, you could go dot 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 from there. And that's actually really a real situation. It's real. I'm sharing it because it's got to do with the folly of going through careers, being passionate. You and I can get high on our passion, and then we get asked, well, what is the effect on our relationships close to us? So
No, that's
over to
that
you, man.
that's very honest and very wow. That's wow. Yeah, okay. Um, so I was agreeing with you completely on the part of you're so focused and you're so, this is all that it is. Um, but I would probably have to back off a tiny bit and say the biggest folly, and I know some people might not think this, but when she was 14 years old, we moved to Europe and we lived in Europe for 5 years. And I traveled everywhere and taught and did all kinds of stuff and did photography and all this stuff. And in that time frame, it was a good experience for her in a lot of ways. But one of the things that I was so focused on in doing this work that I was doing there is we didn't, my wife and I didn't have a chance to really educate and get involved in her relationships. And she had problems with the first couple of relationships, which isn't uncommon,
Yeah.
but when she went to undergraduate school, her relationship destroyed the first attempt at undergraduate school. But like I said, now she's got her undergraduate degree, she's got her master's
Yeah.
degree. She's an existential psychotherapist in Albuquerque.
Oh, I didn't know that. So that
Yeah.
must feel pretty good for you, Dad.
Yeah. So that's the upside. But the downside is being honest. I think I'm right there with you on 90% of that for sure.
All
Yeah.
right.
That was very honest.
Great to chat. I'm sure we'll do it again some point.
Man, thank you. I am, like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed this and I'm happy to come back and chat anytime. I learned so much about you and what you're doing and the insight and the questions were great. I appreciate your time.
All the best. See you soon.